Hello everybody and welcome back to my What I'm Sowing week by week guide. I forget which week this is, I think 4 now. Quite an important week. First full weekend in March. The reason that's quite important for me is that that's when I put the bulk of my tomatoes in. Typically I have room and capacity and scope to house my tomatoes for about 8 weeks. Now my last frost date here is about the second week of May, so if I do this now, we'll get them out into the ground. I'll then put bell cloches on over the top of them out of old water bottles, and that should see me with some fleece if needed through that period. So we're about at the right point now to start sowing them. I can, in theory, leave them a couple of weeks if the weather's looking particularly nasty, like it's going to frost right at the very end. I can always keep them in and say, actually, you know what, I'm going to keep them in for another couple of weeks. Or I do have a gas-powered greenhouse heater that goes in my polytunnel, so I can always pop them next to that, set very, very low, if need be, just to keep them going for an extra week or two while any danger of frost is past. The other things I will be sowing this week, apart from those tomatoes, are chard. This one is a rhubarb chard named Vulcan. I'll be sowing some Brussels sprouts. First of, I think, 2 types this year. These ones are Darkmar 21. Apparently very, very sweet and tasty ones, these ones, so that's why I got these ones this year. And then the first of a great many sowings of spring onions. This time it will be Performer. Normally I do White Lisbon, but this time it's going to be Performer. Right, so let's start with Brussels sprouts. Let's put the sprouts in first. Very simple sowing technique, and while I'm doing this I will say once again, if you are in a different zone to me, which is zone A/B on the border, adjust your growing times accordingly, and also likewise if you don't have heated propagators like I do and have access to a polytunnel, like I said, with heat, adjust your growing for tender crops. Now Brussels sprouts aren't a particularly tender crop, they don't need a lot of heat. In fact, they prefer not a lot of heat to get started, quite low, sort of 15-16 degrees, and as soon as they're up, get them out of the propagator. I'll then wait till they're sort of yay high, first sort of 2 or 4 true leaves, and then get them straight outside into the polytunnel, and then from the polytunnel we'll go into their final destination probably towards the end of April. Now I'm going to sow just one of these small trays again, 12 cell, 12 full size Brussels plants is more than enough for what we will need, particularly as I'm growing 2 types. That leaves me with 24 plants, so that's fine. I am going to plant 2 seeds in each cell, as is my wont. As per all of my other sowings, what I've done is I've just filled it with compost, tamped it down. I'll then sow these and top it back up. General rule of thumb is you only plant seeds twice their height in terms of compost coverage. It's not an exact science, so don't panic if it's ever so slightly deeper. What you don't want, though, is that you don't want you wouldn't fill this half full, plant these seeds and expect them to make their way all the way to the surface. They just don't have the energy reserves in the seed to allow that to happen. So yeah, just be a little bit sensible about it. Obviously, if it's a squash seed or like a cucumber, you know, planting that deep is not a problem. Same with peas, things like that. They don't mind being planted fairly deep. So what I'll do is very, very light covering, compost on the top, just really enough to cover them, and those ones are done. Then we have the chard. Now these are big seeds. Don't know if you can see, chard are very large by comparison. Again, I'll probably sow these 2 to a cell we don't eat huge quantities of chard, but it's nice to have it there as a leafy green. Actually, what I tend to do is, when it is in season and it is available, if we've got more than we can eat, I'll still continue to pick it because that encourages it to grow, and I will freeze and save the rest, because I treat it much like spinach in some of my curries. So and it's excellent in there. So wilt it down, freeze it, takes up not a lot of room if you do it that way around, and yeah, excellent spinach replacement. Same again, really. You know, very, very simple. Just tamp these down. All of these, incidentally, once I've done talking to you, I will go and deluge. So what I'll do is I'll put them under. I've got one of those mixer taps that you press a button and it becomes like a mist, almost like a shower. Just gentle shower. Equally, you can get a pop bottle, put some holes in the top, or you can buy special attachments that screw onto the top of 2-litre bottles. Just make sure it's all the way through, and that's it basically, until they are at true leaves or they've dried out. You know, my propagators generally, if they're in a propagator, they'll have the vents shut about halfway, so not a lot of that moisture is going to escape. So even if it does take a long time, something like a chili pepper that takes up to 4 weeks, or generally I don't think they take that long, they won't have dried out. What you don't want to do is leave seeds sitting for long periods in very moist conditions, because they'll just rot, you know. My spring onions, I will sow half of this, so I'll sow the other half with something else. I'll see what I've got knocking around. I think I might have some old onion seed that I might put in that side, because I don't need this many, because we sow spring onions so regularly, but we do eat a lot of them, which is why I'm doing half of this now, and I'll do those about every 4 to 6 weeks throughout the season. Just a note about these, I'm very impressed with these. I got them from Lidl. I'll show you this. Pack of 4. That's bases, inserts and tops. 4 for £3.99, which I thought was excellent. I'm not sponsored, paid or endorsed in any way, shape or form by Lidl to say that. You know, I just thought they were very good value. The only issue is these ones don't have any holes in the bottom, so all I did was got my little soldering iron, popped some holes in the bottom, and away you go. Very, very cost effective. Right, spring onions. This is a particularly small pack. Normally I've got quite a lot in there, but there's not a lot in this one, so I'll just sow until I've run out. Pretty much the whole pack's going to go in here. Spring onions, don't really worry. I mean, 6, 8, 10. I mean, because we eat them quite a lot. I mean, it doesn't really matter what size the clump is. Quite frankly, it'll get thinned out and used. We'll be harvesting from these once they're up to scale at least twice a week. We do it a lot of spring onions, between the 6 of us. So yeah, other than that, that's it. Got this little label on the side as opposed to from a stick on the top. Other than that, that's that. Now we come to my favourite bit. One of my favourite bits of the entire year, in actual fact, and that is sowing of my own tomato seeds. Now, last year I grew 2 types of blight-resistant tomatoes, Crimson Crush and Crimson Blush. And what I did was I got a paintbrush and I attempted to cross-pollinate the 2. Now, for those of you that don't know, Crimson Crush and Crimson Blush are both hybrids. They're both F1s, which means it's the first generation cross, which means that its offspring won't breed true, which is fine. So I've crossed the 2 F1 hybrids, effectively creating an F1 of 2 F1s. However, I'm still expecting a great deal of variability, because the offspring from each of those F1s would have been variable, and although crossing them together you'll get a more stable version, you're going to have huge variability. And the aim is to grow quite a large quantity of them, and keep the most typey, so the ones that are most true to how I want them to grow and that have the most blight resistance, and keep fruit from those for next year. So all I've done is I've taken the best fruits of those cross pollinations I made, taken the seeds out, which is quite an interesting technique, and I'll show you that later in the year when I start to save those seeds. I did a fermented approach, yeah, so we'll keep the most typey of those, and for future generations, and we'll do that. I'm hoping within sort of 5 or 6 generations I should have a fairly bite resistant, fairly large, I'd say self-pollinating, consistent tomato type. I have gone overboard in terms of my seed saving. I've deliberately saved way more than I need, just in case, because you never know, with frosts, you know, you might get a late one that absolutely destroys you. I'm just going to sow this one. I've got 3 trays, so I'm sowing 75 at the moment. Depending on bed space, which I need to finish sort of working out in my head, because some of the beds aren't actually finished yet, I may sow another 50 even. These will all be for outdoor use, barring maybe 1 or 2 to fill gaps in the polytunnel, because the polytunnel will predominantly be the sun golds for cherry tomatoes. So I'm only going to sow the one, because there's no point me keeping you here to watch me blather on for forever and a day, doing the same thing. So yeah, that's it. You know, it's fairly straightforward. Because these have been fermented, they are actually very easy to see and separate. I have to say that these are good sized seed. If you compare them to something like a sun gold, these are a decent sized seed. Same as everything else, I haven't labelled these because, quite frankly, when they come up, they'll look like tomatoes, and I'll go, oh, I know exactly what they are, because I'm only really growing sun gold and these this year. So it will either be one or the other, and sun gold will all be labelled. So that's it, you know, just put a bit over. I did run a germination test about 6 weeks ago on these, and I have near 100% germination, so I'm very comfortable just sowing a single seed per cell here, on the expectation that probably 80% will come up. If I'm sowing another 50 later on, that's effectively me sowing 125, and I need about 100, I think, this year, so that allows for 25 duds, plus of course the germination test, which you know, we'll see. If they go leggy, then we'll just knock them on the head and they'll go into the compost. If they don't go too leggy, then maybe we'll stick them in the ground and see how they go as well. Maybe we'll get an extra early crop. But that's that, and that's it for this week. Next week, however, we have quite a lot. We've got at least, I think it's 6 or 7 different seeds we're sowing next week. So next week will probably be a slightly longer video. I'll probably try and do a bit of a catch up on that video as well, showing you some of the crops that we've got, and in terms of how well they've germinated and how far they've progressed. We've had some really fantastic successes, and particularly the celeriac. Oh, sorry, making you dizzy by knocking you there. The celeriac, I'll show you the sun golds. We had 11 seeds in the pack, and we've got 11 plants. 10 I'd probably keep, and one's probably going to end up getting knocked on the head, but that's pretty good going, which is good because they were very expensive seed, unlike mine where I've saved zillions. There's a lot of these not. Being another F1, sun gold is something else I'd like to kind of replicate as an open pollinated version. I might give these a go next year, save a couple of seed from one of them and see a couple of fruit from one of them, and see if I can create a viable seed over 5, 6, 7 generations that has the same characteristics, which is its sweetness. That for me is a small cherry, highly productive, very sweet. That's the key for me. If we can maintain that in a consistent format, I'd be ecstatic. But I'm not holding my breath, because that's a much harder series of tasks to build in, you know. And quite frankly, these are more like snacks, you know, whereas the Crimson Blush cross hybrids are for our mainstay potatoes. They're the ones where we make soups and sauces and passata and purees and ketchups and all that kind of thing. We go through an awful lot, and we preserve vast quantities because we eat at least 1 to 2 tomato-based pasta meals a week, and probably another one or two where tomatoes or chopped tomatoes are a component. That's all we catch up using a year. It's a high value crop for us. So that one's got to take priority, I'm afraid. Other than that, I will see you next week. What I'm saying again, I do have a few other projects on the go at the moment at the allotment, and I'll take some footage and try and put up some odds and sods as well, just so that you can see what I'm doing. I will see you next week.